Hello YouTube, and welcome to Religious Violence Monday. You know, it's not very often that we have two of these incidents reported in the same day, but today isn't our lucky day. I'm referring to, of course, 37 dead in Moscow, a subway suicide bombing, probably the result of Muslim extremists. Not very surprising anymore. But what is surprising is that somehow on the same day, in the United States, we have 9 people convicted, members of a Christian militia called Hutari, accused on charges of sedition and planning to use weapons of mass destruction. These people were apparently fundamentalist Christians, believers in the end times theology and the return of Jesus imminently. They were far-right conservative extremists, and they were conspiracy theorists, believers in the New World Order. These people decided that they'd had enough of the New World Order, and they'd had enough of the heathen government, and they'd had enough of these liberals taking their money. So they decided to do something about it and kill a police officer and bomb his funeral. Now, what upsets me about this story, apart from the obvious, is that if you go to the Fox News website and read the comments on this story, there were a bunch of people asserting that they believe this is not a real Christian group, but rather it's an inside job, and that the government has faked this whole thing in order to make Christians look bad, in order to make the tea baggers look bad, the Tea Partiers look bad, and in order to make conservatives look bad. And this is not the first time we've seen this. Unfortunately, every time there's an act of terrorism against the government, there is a group of anti-government people who assert that no anti-government person could have possibly committed a crime of violence against the government. That's ridiculous. It was clearly an inside job. It's clearly the government seeking sympathy, and on no evidence whatsoever, they dismissed the official story for a conspiracy theory. The same thing happened when that lunatic flew a plane into the IRS in Austin in February. A bunch of conservatives, fairly extreme conservatives, said that he wasn't actually an anti-government guy. He was an inside job. Liberals faked it. Liberals faked it to make conservatives look bad. And this point of view, it fails to acknowledge reality. It just insists that when an event happens that contradicts their political philosophy, it must not be true. There must be some other explanation, because they can't accept that somehow reality might produce events that aren't completely compatible with their worldview. That's a dangerous thing, when you have people who are willing to just completely rewrite the news in order to fit their own view of how things ought to happen. You've got a problem. Now, perhaps I should concede that, of course, sometimes it is a fake. Comes to mind is that stupid bitch back in the 2008 U.S. presidential election who carved a backwards B into her face and then tried to blame it on black people. And she later came forward, of course, and said that she carved that B herself and that it wasn't Obama supporters. But for a while, a few conservatives, including some people on my YouTube channel way back in the day, were saying, look, look what Obama supporters did. And then, of course, it turned out to be a fake. So it does happen occasionally, but when you don't have any evidence to suggest that it's an inside job or that it's a fake, you shouldn't assert that, because that's just making up facts for whatever seems to be convenient to you. So that's one problem. Another problem is that people refuse to acknowledge that any amount of extremist rhetoric will eventually produce people who are willing to commit violence. On March 2nd, 2010, a YouTube user named ToolTime9901 made a video in which he expressed his concern that someone following the rhetoric of conspiracy theorist and radio host Alex Jones would act against the government and commit an act of violence. Tooltime made this video on March the 2nd, and 2 days later, on March the 4th, a 9/11 conspiracy theorist shot up the Pentagon. Now, I would say that Tooltime is a mighty prophet if I weren't intelligent enough to know better. But still, there is a serious issue here, which is that if you tell people that the government is always lying to them, that the government has committed crimes of violence against their own people that the government has not committed, you tell them that the current president is the next Hitler, you tell them, as Glenn Beck has done, that communists have taken over and that people are going to be slaughtered, if you tell them that there's about to be a Holocaust in America, as conspiracy theorists often say, you're going to produce an environment in which some extremists are going to take violent retaliation against the government. And it shouldn't be difficult for you to understand why that is. If you thought the next Hitler had just taken over America, if you honestly thought there was about to be a massive genocide in this country, would you not consider violence as an option? You would almost have to consider violence as an option. So when you have people, Glenn Beck, Alex Jones, Rush Limbaugh, and certain far-left figures also, perhaps, you're going to create an environment in which some extremists are going to feel that they need to take violent action. And the same goes for the Muslim religion. The Quran, it's kind of a violent book. Now, most Muslims manage to interpret it in a way that makes it seem not so violent. But the fact of the matter is that when you tell people that a book that clearly endorses violence is the Word of God, there's going to be a few of them who take that seriously. Now, of course, I'm not saying that all Muslims are violent. I'm not saying that most Muslims are violent. I'm just not saying that most conspiracy theorists are violent. I'm not even saying that most political extremists are violent. Of course they aren't. If the majority, or even if any large percentage of any of these groups were violent, we'd have gunfire in the streets every night. All I'm saying is that when you distribute misinformation that leads people to believe that they might need to take violent action to prevent horrible things from happening, such as an infidel takeover of the world, or a new genocide in America, or evil dictators taking over the country, if you falsely spread this information, you're going to produce people who will take violent action. And people with wide radio or TV or even internet audiences need to acknowledge that. This has been Religious Violence Monday. Stay rational. Don't kill people.